Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members of the Assembly. House Concurrent Resolution 3047 is a resolution that gives the people of North Dakota an opportunity to change the governance structure of North Dakota's higher education system. You'll see in lines 1 through 4 of the resolution that this, if approved by the voters, would create a Department of Higher Education and repeal Section 6 of Article 8 of the Constitution, which established the State Board of Higher Education and its responsibilities. In lines 6 through 8, you'll see that the Department of Higher Education would be established effective July 1st of 2015, and lines 11 through 14 instruct that this measure would be placed on the ballot during the general election of 2014. Section 1, subsection 1 creates the department within the executive branch of government and establishes the cities in which sites of higher education will be located. The missions of those sites would be up to the director. This allows for a more flexible system as needs of our state change and for rapidly changing educational delivery methods. Subsection 2 rests the oversight of the director in the hands of the governor. This provides a clear chain of command and accountability. The appointment will be for terms of 3 years and reappointments are allowable. The director may also be removed from the governor by the governor for cause if there is legitimate reason. Subsection 3 lays out some of the requirements and qualifications necessary for choosing a director. This is to make sure that the director is of the highest quality. The director will be in charge of a more than $3 billion enterprise with many different areas to consider, and we want to make sure we have someone who is uniquely familiar with higher education delivery, administration, and has a strong record of managerial experience. Item D of subsection 3 reinforces the idea of a unified system of operation and not 11 independent systems. Subsection 4 grants the director full authority with the management and operation of the department within constitutional and statutory requirements and limitations. This clarifies the role of the legislature and allows for changes in policy to be made over time by the Legislative Assembly without a need to micromanage. Subsection 4B says the director shall hire a president of each institution in the system and that the president shall report to the director. Section 2 is the repeal of Section 6 of Article 8, and Section 3 establishes the effective date of July 1st, 2015. House Concurrent Resolution 3047 allows the people of North Dakota to adopt a modified governance structure for higher education in this state by setting up a clear chain of command from the governor to the director to the presidents and clarifying the role of the Legislative Assembly. After much discussion, your House Education Committee recommends a do pass, and we urge the Assembly to concur. Mr. Speaker, may I continue?
You may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the Assembly, we've had this discussion a few times in this chamber, and I'll admit that last session I wasn't ready to make a change like this in higher education. This session, I've changed my mind. I've seen a very volatile system of governance in this important area over the very short time I've been here. When mistakes are made, we blame the board, and the board blames us. When the legislature tries to make statutory changes to higher ed policy, we're told we have no authority. But our constituents expect action. Furthermore, when the discussion of real policy is overcast by controversy, mistrust, and power struggles, the ones who really lose out are our customers, the students. We are nearing total system-wide budgets of nearly $1 billion of taxpayer support, and this measure, if supported by the people, would allow us to operate this department in a similar fashion to our Department of Human Services, our Department of Transportation, our Department of Commerce, and our Department of Workers' Compensation, which, by the way, used to have an independent board governance structure until 2008 when the voters decided to change to a cabinet-level director position. Why should higher ed be handled so much differently? In a letter of written testimony, the State Board of Higher Education asked, are the distractions, uncertainty, and political influence that would result from the proposed reorganization be in the best interests of North Dakota stakeholders? The board does not believe so. However, I would ask you, my colleagues in the House, the very same question. Are the current distractions, uncertainty, and political influence are those in the best interest of North Dakota's stakeholders? If you're reading the papers and following the news, I think you'll agree that it's not a healthy atmosphere, and that leads me to support this measure. This is not an initiative because of the last 75 years. This is an initiative for the next 75 years. Ladies and gentlemen of the Assembly, by passing this resolution, you do not make this a law. If you vote green with your committee, you will give the Board of Higher Education, and more importantly, the voters of North Dakota, the opportunity to evaluate the current governance structure and potentially make a change. Please support this resolution. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there any discussion? Representative Maragos.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the bill carrier yield to a question?
Representative Heilman, would you yield to a question?
Mr. Speaker, I will.
Representative Maragos.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Heilman, on the repealer of Section 6. If Section 6 was repealed, would that have the effect of removing the institutions from the Constitution, the locations?
Representative Heilman.
Mr. Speaker and Representative Maragos, if you'll refer to the bill or the resolution, you'll see that Section 1, Subsection 1 designates that sites of higher education will include Bismarck, Bottineau, Devils Lake, Dickinson, Fargo, Grand Forks, Mayville, Minot, Valley City, Wahpeton, and Williston, which effectively has all of the locations that we have now. But the intent, as I understand it, and perhaps the chairman of the Education Committee or the bill sponsor would care to comment, but the intent, from as I see it, is the missions may change within the universities, but the sites would remain the same.
If I may continue, Mr. Speaker.
You may continue, Representative Maragos.
Representative Heilman, I'll ask the question one more time. In the repealer, if this passed, would the locations of the institutions be removed from the Constitution in spite of what's in Section 1?
Representative Heilman.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Maragos, as written, the repealer would remove all of Section 6 and replace it with language from Section 1 if passed by the people. Thank you,
Representative Heilman. Mr. Speaker and members of the Assembly, I am going to support this resolution in hopes that when it gets over to the Senate, that they probably put a period after, in Section 1, after public higher education, and then just remove that language of the sites, and then remove the repealer, and just have this a straight-up question on whether we should replace the Board of Higher Education with the Department of Education. And so I guess that might be a leap, but I hope that does happen. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there further discussion? Representative Nathy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In regards to Representative Maragos' question in regards to the repealer in Section 2, basically all that does is eliminate the board as it stands now.
Is there further discussion? Representative Becker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Assembly. I have a bill following this one, but I rise to support this bill. I believe that as the representative from District 45 mentioned, the time is now, the need is there. We need to change how things are handled so that we have a person where the buck stops. And I recommend a do pass on this one. I also recommend a do pass on the following one. I think that we can leave to the voters which method is best, but they're both very good ideas. Thank you.
Is there further discussion? Representative Glassheim.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the Assembly. Universities and colleges are ancient institutions with a high calling. They are places which have four purposes. They prepare the next generation for careers. They preserve and transmit the best in thought and culture. They are places of free speech, debate, and inquiry. And through research and publication, they move civilization forward a bit at a time. My fear is that both bills on today's calendar will undermine the basic missions and historic traditions of colleges and universities. They need to be protected from the changing whims and passions of political life. They need to be governed by people with a long view, both backward and forward. In addition, I fear the vitality and independence of the individual campuses will be compromised in a bureaucratic hierarchy with one man hiring and firing the presidents. I would hope that we not use recent management mistakes under the current board as an excuse for undermining the long-term well-being of the university system.
Representative Clemene.
Mr. Speaker, members of the Assembly, just to kind of bring us up to date as to where we are now, we've got 11 institutions of higher education in North Dakota. They have collectively about a $3 billion budget per biennium, about 1/3 of which is provided by the legislature through appropriations. There are about 39,000 students attending these 11 institutions. There are approximately 12,000 employees at these institutions. This major industry in North Dakota, the industry of higher education, is controlled and administered by a board consisting of 8 part-time volunteers who can only be removed by impeachment. I'm asking, what's wrong with this picture? What's wrong with this picture? We've got a $3 billion industry going on in North Dakota run by part-time volunteers who have no accountability. This section of the Constitution was enacted in 1938, 75 years ago. I think there's been many changes in the state of North Dakota since 1938. It's time now, I think, to let the people decide if the present system of management of the institutions of higher education should be changed.
Representative Scarpel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the Assembly. It's not often I stand up in opposition to something that Representative Carlson wants, but today I am. And I've had numerous discussions about our majority leader with regard to this issue. And while I know he's passionate about his belief that the board is a problem, I would submit to you the problem we have is not the board, but the way we achieve board members. And I think that if we put more effort as a legislature into ensuring that the candidates that are brought forward to serve on the State Board of Higher Education represent the types of industries, the types of business, the types of background that that board needs, I think we would do a much larger service to the students of North Dakota. The controversy that Representative Heilman talks about is a controversy of now. If you were dissatisfied with higher education 2 years ago, today's controversy is entirely different, motivated in an entirely different way. And if you think that supporting the people promoting the controversy today is in the best interest of the students, I'm sorry, but I believe you're mistaken. We have a system of higher education in North Dakota over the past decades that has been a loosely knit federated system. It's not a system. To use the word system is inappropriate, to be very honest with you, because it's not a system. If we truly want a system, we need to have a chancellor who has authority, and we need him to be able to do things that may not be politically popular. They may not be politically popular. And if you subject that chancellor's job to a political position, I believe it's a grave mistake. Because there are times that people in authority have to make unpopular decisions. And this is one of those times. And this chancellor has made some unpopular decisions. And he's not probably been the most politically astute. But I can assure you that his motives are virtually identical to the motives that you had 2 years ago when you wanted change in higher education. This is not the time for this change. I would hope you vote red.
Is there further discussion? Representative Carlson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Scarpel, for getting me to my feet. Because I was going to let this pass, because I think Representative Heilman did an exceptional job of explaining what the bill does, the intentions of why it was introduced, and what the bill does. The personalities, whether we like it or not, get in the way. And you could read the paper on a daily basis and find all kinds of reasons to think there's something wrong with every phase of the system. Whether it be past presidents writing letters saying that this is the wrong guy, who they never worked with, or whether or not we find out that we have our national news for having diploma mills at one of our campuses. Or you get letters from a board like this that to me are very disturbing about the governance. This is about governance, by the way, not personalities. But when a letter is sent out to the college presidents, it says, host campuses shall plan and sponsor the following events. The night preceding the meeting, there will be a dinner from 7 to 9 at a premier off-campus restaurant for higher education board members and the chancellor only. I guess the president doesn't count. And then it goes on to say the various meetings they have, and the only one that the president's allowed to come to is luncheon. Is that the kind of governance we want? I don't think that's the kind of governance we want. This isn't made up. This is real. The taxpayers in North Dakota have historically invested more per capita than any other state per capita in higher education. Historically, year after year after year, and they expect two things: results and accountability. We did a roundtable. A lot of us in here sat through that roundtable, and we said, okay, flexibility with accountability. I maintain in many cases we only got half of the equation. So we can fight about whether the board is a fourth branch of government or whether they're not. Or whether they pull out the Constitution card and say, leave me alone, that's my decision only to make. I don't think our founders ever imagined that to be the case. So this is asking the people. We've had 75 years of governance by the board. Do you think that we could have a different model for the next 75 years? Or until the people put it on the ballot again and vote on it? It's a very simple bill. It lays out a very clear chain of command. The governor, the director, the presidents, and the legislative assembly. Pretty clear. I think this is a good idea. I think the people are ready to take a look at this and have a vote on it. And I would hope that we would pass this. This is no longer a little venture. This is an enterprise, a $3 billion enterprise. That's with a B. $1 billion of state money. There isn't any other budget in this place that we wouldn't want to have some amount of say in how it goes when we turn over $1 billion of the taxpayers' money. This isn't to belittle the board. I don't envy their position. But it is way beyond 8 volunteers being able to run this $3 billion enterprise. We need to have this bill passed and sent to the people. I think they expect us good management of state government and its resources, and I think it does just that. So, Mr. Speaker, I would hope we would pass this bill. Let the Senate have a look at it, and let's let the voters of North Dakota weigh in on this issue and make sure that we provide quality education for our students for the next 75 years.
Is there any further discussion? Representative Hawken.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and members of the Assembly, I don't think there's any doubt from those of you who've been around how much I care about education in general and particularly higher education. The current situation we find ourselves in is certainly not a good one. Perhaps it is time to look at something different. I am concerned, however, that it is a single director. There was a reason for the board. A number of states have switched to this and then switched back to a system like what we have now. So this is a concern. I'm comforted by the fact the Senate can at least look at it, but that's a concern. You are then saying one person is a czar, and as we're finding out right now, if that's your personality, it doesn't work very well. We have to have somebody there that is a collaborative, forward-thinking person who wants education to be what education should be, as Representative Glassheim so eloquently stated. This is extremely important. We talk a lot about how much it costs us, but I think if we spend a little time looking at the revenue side, it's pretty great, let alone what happens to all those students that go out and make a fine lives for themselves after they've been there. This is a serious issue as we move forward. Maybe it is the right time. I believe in that system. I'm having a real hard time with this one. But I do think it would need to be tweaked if we passed it.
Representative Scarpel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the Assembly, kind of enjoy having a discussion with our majority leader. And his example of a poor letter points out exactly what I said. We have to make sure we have qualified people on the board. I believe we still need the board. I believe qualified people, thoughtful people, would not show that kind of arrogance. I also think, Mr. Speaker, that I support the flexibility granted to the higher education. Don't get me wrong. I believe our research institutions can do great things for the state of North Dakota, and I support higher education. But I submit to you, if you're going to expect more accountability out of a governor's appointee, you're wrong. It will be political expediency that will drive that whole agenda. And you need to ask yourself, is one governor any more qualified or as qualified as 8 qualified volunteers?
Representative Heilman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to point out something to the Assembly that I think may be getting overlooked. Yes, this resolution, if approved by the voters, would repeal the section that establishes the board. There's no doubt about that. But if you refer to page 2, subsection 4, and lines 11 and 12, it says the director has full executive responsibility, and a little further, within constitutional and statutory requirements and limitations. Part of the appeal to me for this resolution was that if we really like a board idea, statutorily we can establish a board that the director may have to run some of his policies through, or selection criteria, or whatever the case is. What I don't like about the constitutional as it stands is that it kind of boxes us in, and we really don't have much of that authority to make some changes without major initiatives like this. And so if we feel that we need a board or that we need some other types of statute that limits the authority of the director, we can establish that. And that's why I think as time goes on, as we respond to the needs of the people, this bill allows us that flexibility.
Representative Damshin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and members of the Assembly, just a short comment. I think we're trying to kid ourselves if we're going to imply that politics isn't involved in the present system. And it may very well be in a new system. But to put this out to the people for a vote can only be right. And I think it's unfortunate that we would resist that, and it's unfortunate that we would fault the students of the universities for voicing their opinion on the situation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there further discussion? Representative Carlson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I knew this wouldn't be just a 2-minute discussion today that we'd have on higher education and its governance. But we've got to put aside the personalities, And we've got to put aside what's happened in the past and look to the future. We talk about a university system, and I read with interest the bullet points of the audit prepared by the state auditor, where it talked about, despite the 2001 roundtable putting into code that the institutions of higher education are a unified system, we conclude they are not a unified system in many respects. These would include capital projects, establishing, monitoring, and use of student fees, financial aid, accounting, as well as admissions, recommending that either may become one or separate. So, and then it goes on to say the university system is not mentioned in the Board of Higher Education strategic plan. Look at the budget for their office. They should be mentioned somewhere. And it says, in fact, there's no documented plan establishing the functions, duties, and expectations of the office. It would be next to impossible to determine if the university system is performing well or meeting expectations, since there is no such documentation. This comes from our state auditor. So, do we need to make a change? I could find many reasons why they've done some good things, and I could find just as many reasons why they've done some bad things. But right now, it's not our responsibility, according to them, to be too deeply involved, because our responsibility is to stand back and give them the money. Is one person in charge a good thing? I care to wager, if you read the minutes since the new chancellor came, that they pretty much made one man in charge, no different than what we're asking to do. Read them over yourself. I've read them. They went from a board where they ran almost everything because of a different chancellor to a board where they turned most everything over because of a new chancellor. Whether they did that's right or wrong, I'm not here to say. But I'm here to tell you that the system needs to be changed for the future. It isn't a criticism of those board members. That's a thankless job they've done. But we like to hang our hats and say, well, you just can't slap the board around that way. This is not meant to do that. This is meant to change the governance. It's meant to have a clear chain of command and a clear amount of responsibility to the various people that are down that chain of command. So I think this is a good bill, and I think it needs to be passed. I think the people need to weigh in on it, and then we need to go forward with providing the best quality education at the amount of money we can afford for those kids in North Dakota going on to be our future workforce in North Dakota. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the House has before it for final consideration House Concurrent Resolution 3047. The clerk will open the key and you may record your vote. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Key will be closed and the clerk will take the record. The final votes are 64 yea, 28 nay, 2 absent, not voting. House Concurrent Resolution 3047 is declared passed.